My brothers and sisters in Christ, in recent days we've been hearing from the words of St. Paul about the relationship we have with the law. Does the law justify us? For the Jewish people, the covenant that was given, the observance of the law, was what made you a just person. But as Paul has been telling us, that is not so for the Christian. In yesterday's reading, we heard the fact that those who were wishing of the Gentiles to be circumcised, he said, then you are under the grip of the law. As I say, circumcision was part of the covenant to be part of the Jewish people in this way, of the household of God. But now in the fulfillment of the covenant, of the promise in Christ Jesus, the law is no longer the custodian, but faith in Christ Jesus itself. Our justification comes in Christ. Christ in us. He brings about our justification. And so when we hear today's gospel passage with a continuation of Jesus denouncing the hypocrisy of the scribes and Pharisees, we hear Jesus say something very interesting. He says, woe to you, you observe, you pay, tithes of mint and herbs and all these things, but you ignore things like judgment and love of neighbor and of God. And he says, these other things you should have done as well as this. And so what he's pointing to is the fact that it is no longer those small observances. The things the Pharisees are obsessing over are not the things that justify. So as they constantly nitpick at Jesus, he's trying to tell them these things don't justify you anymore. But you should observe them because the law was the custodian to prepare the hearts for the fullness in Christ. That is the love of God. And so the love of God made manifest in the person of Jesus Christ, we are invited to that love. And so Christ in us is to conform us to the love in whose image and likeness we are created. The law helps to discipline us, to make sure that we are in conformity with love of God and neighbor. When we look at the 10 commandments, the first 3 commandments are about love of God, the other 7 are about love of neighbor. And so the commandments themselves, our observance don't justify, but they help govern us, train us in the ways of love. This is what justifies the love of God in us. And so, when he says this, it helps us avoid a trap in which, to one extreme, a mindset of legalism, which is just this empty observance of precepts that consists of no love, but just empty observance, checking boxes. And on the other hand, those that would decry legalism and say observances and commandments, the rules are out the window, it's just about love. Well, yes, it is, but the precepts help govern us and train us in the ways of God's love. And so, we must avoid empty observance, but we also must be true to precepts, because as fallen sinners, we do not naturally love as we should. But by the grace of God, and through the building up of virtue, which are habits, that observance, by building up a life of virtue, we can be purified more and more each day in the love of God and love of neighbor. And this, when Christ fully reigns in us, that is what justifies. May God bless you all.